In what ways are we free? Do we choose to accept Christ after God reveals himself to us? Or does God only draw us to a way to him that we can resist him? Or we can't resist him? Let me read that again. Do we choose to accept Christ after God reveals himself to us? Or does God draw us to him in a way that we cannot resist?
So is that free question is part of that? The first one, the one way.
You said in what way are we free? Yep.
In what ways are we free?
I guess it's like A or B. Is it like an A or B?
It's like an A or B? Who wrote this? Is it okay? What does it mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, in what ways are we free? Is this like tied into the question, or is it like a separate question?
I think all the questions are kind of tied into the same.
Okay, I'll keep reading all the questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Here, we'll keep going on. You just answer the draw one first, then we'll go on and I'll answer the next ones.
Okay.
We'll get to the next ones.
Paul in Romans 8, he talks about being in the Spirit and being in the flesh. And in Romans 8:9, he says this, you, it says you, and this is written to the church in Rome. That's why it's called Romans. It says you, the church of Rome, however, are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If, in fact, the Spirit of God dwells in you, anyone who does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. So when you belong to Christ, when you receive him, when you accept him, you are in the Spirit. And beforehand, you are in the flesh. So let's see what Paul has to say about what happens in the flesh. Romans chapter 8, verse 7 says, for the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it indeed does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. And as in verse 8 says, those who are in the flesh cannot please God. Now, according to Paul, if you're in the flesh and you help an old lady across the street, does that please God? How is it described? It's described as hostile to God. It is not submitting to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. It is not pleasing to God. Those who are in the flesh. If you are in the flesh and you help an old lady across the street, that is not pleasing to God. If you are in the flesh and you go to the soup kitchen and you give like a bunch of soup, right? And you like even throwing cookies on top of that to everybody, right? If you are in the flesh, according to Paul, that is not pleasing to God. It is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. Now, if you have faith or any type of belief in Jesus Christ, yet you are in the flesh, Paul says that it is hostile to God, does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. It cannot please God. Now, the question you have to ask is God pleased by a type of faith? Whatever faith it is, a faith that is described as hostile to him, that is described as not submitting to his law, a faith that cannot please him. Is God going to save you as a result of that faith? Obviously not. God does not save you because of a faith that is not pleasing to him and is hostile to him. It is not in obedience to him. So, in order to believe, right, God must do something first. In order to give, he has to, at first, change you as you are. You cannot be the person you are in the flesh and still be obedient to God. God has to change you internally. The problem is not that you don't believe. The problem is who you are. You are a bad person, and God has to change that from the heart. And when he changes you from the heart, then you can believe in him. Hopefully that clears it up.